Sigh of relief. This session is over. I'm Jon Caldara, your political, well, what am I called now? Oh yeah, devil's advocate. I'm the president of the Independence Institute, and those people down at the legislature who get to watch it day in and day out and get paid for it. Lynn Bartels from the Denver Post, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
I know you hate it when the session goes out.
Not the first week.
Today
I called people and I was like, God, I miss you. But at the end I was like, if I ever see you again, get out of my face.
High school, you ran around with your yearbook.
It is Gold Dome High School over there.
Yeah, it is.
Without a doubt.
Eli Stokols from Fox 31. You get to wear makeup and go down there.
You're so jealous. Every time I come in here, you do want to talk about makeup. And next time I come, I'm going to bring you your own little compact.
A tube would be good.
Okay, we can do that too.
Hair Club for Men, whatever it is.
You got it.
What's different about covering the Capitol from a television point of view?
You mean different than a newspaper? I don't know. I mean, I think I have to balance trying to, meet the demands of newscast producers who want interesting stories when you keep coming to them with stories about the budget. Their eyes glaze over. So that's a challenge. But I sort of look at my job as very similar to what the newspaper reporters do, because we don't want to miss things. We don't want to only cover things that are
But also you got to write a lot of
TV
online
stories.
content on these stories as well. So you have to type it up. But you always get those great pictures of the guy hitting the gavel, somebody giving it's like, kind of like the flood videos. It's like they all look the same. People at the legislature, it's not good for pictures.
Sometimes it's a struggle, but we do our best.
All right. The big story is always the budget. The budget. And as you said, nobody cares about the budget. We had almost $1 billion shortfall that needed to be closed, and it was the most important thing by every measure. And it's also on a news story like the most boring thing.
Well, parts of it weren't boring. Remember, you had the blow up at first about school breakfasts. That was all budget related. Then you had cutting, Hickenlooper comes out and says, here comes the Democrat and says we're cutting education. And, Republicans, I had to laugh because I saved these press releases. Republicans, Hickenlooper's the greatest thing on earth. And I go, that headline's going to come back and haunt you. And then you had Democrats going, this is our governor and he did this to education. So there was a lot of drama involved. I mean, the reality is you have to have a balanced budget, though. So both sides, you've got a Republican House, a Democratic Senate.
It's a constitutional requirement. Unlike the federal government,
sadly,
we have to balance our budget. That is, we can't spend any more than we've taken in. We can't go into debt. We can't get a loan. So we have to balance it. Where did the cuts go in? Who got hit?
Well, education. If you talk to some people, Benton County, they closed the Fort Lyons Correctional Center. They gave them a 6-month reprieve, but that's the second largest employer in Benton County. It's a huge employer for Southern Colorado. They got hit. You had different cuts here, different cuts there.
Well, at the end of the day, they got the job done.
At the end of the day, they got the job done. Now, Tim Hoover, who covers the budget for the Post, had a really fascinating story about Republicans bragging, we eliminated all these jobs, but they were never real positions in the budget anyhow.
I mean, they weren't filled yet.
Right.
Yeah. So the budget is the key part. Did we do okay? How did Hickenlooper do with the budget?
Well, Hickenlooper did great, and I think, at the end of this is the one big bipartisan piece of legislation that they had to get done. There's a gun to their head. They had to pass this budget. And so we actually saw compromise on this. And Hickenlooper, I think, people recognize more at the end of the session, his shrewdness in starting out and coming with a proposal that was very austere, and starting with school cuts that freaked Democrats out. $332 million to schools was larger than last year's. At the end of the day, the cut to K through 12 education ended up being less than what it was last year. And what Hickenlooper did is he said he started here, and then he left it to the lawmakers to figure it out. And the Democrats kicked and screamed over the cuts. And at the end of the day, to reduce the cuts, they had to give Republicans a couple things that they wanted, put some tax exemptions back on the books. And at the end of the day, I think everybody went home relatively happy. And Hickenlooper could say, as the sort of principal at Gold Dome High School, I got all these kids together and we did something constructive.
And the play went off without a hitch and all the parents were happy. What about Amendment 23? I thought you couldn't cut education spending, yet I haven't seen the CEA or any of the education lobby threaten the lawsuit that I thought was sure to come. Why is that?
Do you think that there's going to be a lawsuit down the road, though? There always is, saying you're not putting enough money into schools or you're not doing this and that. I think...
But we have a constitutional amendment that says you have to balance the budget. We also have another one that says you have to increase spending for K-12 education every year. Instead, we've cut it over $100 million.
I know there's an answer to it, and I once knew it, but I can honestly say I can't remember what it was. Because I asked the same thing, how can you cut education? And someone told me, and because the word education was in it, I was like,
And by
And
the
don't
way,
remember a word of it.
we get all of our news information about the Capitol from the Denver Post.
Hey, at least I'm candid about what I don't know instead of like you just pretending, frothing with facts.
Now listen, as long as you yell while you're saying it,
That's what matters.
people believe you.
There you go.
All right. The other big fight was, of course, redistricting. This is big every 10 years, and this is real insider baseball, but cutting up these lines not only for the House districts, for the United States House, but all the state districts as well. Where are we on that? They didn't come together, did they?
No, and I don't think anyone's that surprised. I mean, the last 4 times we went back to the 70s when this process came up, it's wound up in the courts. So that's where it's going again. And I don't think that's any surprise. I think there was this pretense at the beginning that we're going to put this bipartisan committee together and they're going to go around and listen to people and that it's going to actually work. They called it the Kumbaya Committee. Well, so much for that. As soon as they started drawing maps, there was no more kumbaya. They were yelling at each other and fighting, and it just turned very partisan. And one of the lawmakers, a more moderate fellow, said, something this partisan, you kind of have to have a referee. So I think there were people that maybe weren't as close to it who stood back and said, this is going to the courts, and they knew it all along. Although there was a chance, the governor said they were very close to that. Hickenlooper, I think, was close to playing referee again on this. He said they were, what do you say, 1/16th?
1/16th.
Said they were that close to a compromise. And at the end of the day, they just couldn't get there.
And some of these maps had, for instance, Mike Kaufman living out of the district that he represents now.
Well, wait,
some of them
wait.
were really
part
chopping
of it
up.
is Mike Kaufman's moving. So that was part of it. They were like, you drew Mike Kaufman out of his district because everybody knows he's moving to Greenwood Village. And the Democrats were like, he is? Wait, give us a new map and do all that. Yeah, the map, some of the map pairings were odd. I actually think the most interesting thing out of the whole committee was they met statewide. And I think, and I haven't covered redistricting before, but by all accounts, the public got more engaged than ever because they attended these hearings. They went to Alamosa, they went to Grand Junction, and they attended the hearings, so they were interested.
This committee, this appointed committee.
The Kumbaya Committee of lawmakers. And so when the maps came out, it was terrible for the Democrats. Their PR was awful on it, and Republicans were brilliant on the PR on it and just talked about, hey, well, look, they're drawing a map for Brandon Schaefer. And the very first day, they were just supposed to unveil the maps and nobody say anything. And one of the committee members, Don Coram, got up and said, at this point, every person could live within 30 miles of DIA, all 7 representatives, the way the maps were drawn. Representative David Ballmer, I thought, had a really good point. He said he's sorry that the courts are an option, that if it had to be, they locked you in a room and you had to come with a compromise, it would be like the budget, you would get it done. But now both sides, well, we're in court and we'll see you in court. And
the idea of drawing a district for Brandon Schaefer, the president of the Senate, there's rumor he wants to run for which congressional district? I forget.
Fourth.
well, it depends on how you draw it.
Depends on how you draw it. But he wants to run.
Right.
So if it's the 4th, he'd be going up against Cory Gardner, and you have to make sure that he's drawn into that district. Is he drawn
he's
into
in
that
the
He's
district
in the
right now.
district now. Most maps put him in the district. It's not the issue of being in the 4th. It's the issue of how you draw it so a Democrat could win. Because let's be honest, Betsy Markey, that was Marilyn Musgrave more than anything that Betsy Markey got in, and then
And Barack Obama.
Right, and then she was out, and well, not even Barack Obama, because look at how many points she won by that. I think that was Maryland far more, but it was a great year for Democrats. Republicans wanted Maryland out because they were tired of spending money defending a seat that's very Republican. So it's how you draw the district, and that supposedly was one sticking point. It all depends on who you
again,
talk
it goes
to.
up to the Colorado Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I mean,
Well, no, last time it was Denver District Court that resolved it.
I thought it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. When are we going to figure this out?
well, I don't. Do you know when the court battle takes place?
I might know something.
Yeah.
Do you? What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? What do you know?
I'll
What do you know?
tell us when
What do you
it's
Tell
know?
you when Eli's not listening.
Oh.
I think it has to be decided by December.
Reporters
though.
don't
by
want to
the
get
end of the year.
scooped. All right, let's go to some of the fun stuff. I mean, I know that's the important stuff. Budgeting or redistricting. Nobody cares about that.
I
We
think
almost had
redistricting,
gay
they care.
marriage. We almost had gay marriage, I
Civil
tell you.
unions,
Civil unions, I'm
not
sorry.
gay marriage.
Now, talk to me a little bit this. Colorado, it is against the Constitution here to have a gay marriage. You can have a happy marriage or a lighthearted marriage. You can't have a gay marriage. That almost changed for civil unions, though. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, some people came in and testified against that bill and said, hey, this is gay marriage. They're just calling it something else. But there was a lot of support inside the building and outside the building. I mean, when you went to these hearings, you heard stories from regular people, it seemed like, who were living their lives and not afforded basic legal protections because they're in a same-sex relationship. And the opposition really seemed At the end of the day, it didn't pass. Republicans on this one committee held firm and voted against it, but they were very conflicted about doing so. It seemed, but the opposition were these sort of people who would come in waving the Bible and quoting Leviticus, and it just starts to look more and more like one of those issues that is a generational issue. The numbers are moving more and more towards acceptance of same-sex civil unions. I think that's the way it's going. It didn't happen this session. It could happen as early as next year. They're going to run the same bill again, I think, and I don't know that Republicans want to keep.
In the Senate, a number of Republicans joined almost all, not almost.
No, three.
Three women.
Three women.
The three women.
The three women. So the
Yeah,
women
but
joined.
okay, but here's what's important. It was never a surprise that Gene White was going to vote for it because Al White, when he was there, he was one of the first Republicans to support gay rights. The surprise was Nancy Spence, longtime lawmaker. She's from Arapahoe County, and she is of that older generation. And for someone of that generation, someone, Republican who's been there forever, for the first time to make a vote on this issue, to say it's time. I mean, this is like an old way of thinking that we can't do this. It's some people equate it to the old, a black and a white can't marry type situation. That's what was important.
They can marry now?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So it went to the House. It didn't go to the Kill Committee, which was State Affairs, did it?
No, the irony is it went to the Appropriate Committee, which, well, no, here's what's funny is Mark Ferrandino, who's gay and who's the House sponsor, said it went to the worst possible committee for us.
The appropriate one.
The appropriate one. Judiciary, you couldn't say Frank McNulty, the Speaker, played games. It went to the appropriate committee, but he had the least amount. Listen, that thing was so going to pass if it went to the House floor. I mean, there's only a 33-32 majority, and there were enough Republicans that it wasn't even a one vote.
But it wasn't just Republicans on that committee. There was a Republican who voted for it, and there was a Democrat who voted against it, if I recall.
No.
No,
Was it all
straight party
You're
line.
thinking
Straight
of
party.
an amendment, or an amendment.
I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah, you're not
All right, so
thinking.
this was straight party line.
And I think it was actually marching orders, party line vote, quite frankly.
Marching
in
orders
my-
from whom?
Well, I mean, one of those Republicans on there has a gay uncle, and I think there were people that were conflicted, but I think it was one of those things like, this can't get to the House floor, and it didn't.
Speculate with me on this one. I think there's a really good chance of this passing next year because I think the time has come that this is going to start hurting Republicans, and more Republicans understand that. There's a generational difference here, but if Republicans want to have a good year in 2012, it would be better off to have this thing gone for them.
Yeah, I think the enthusiasm on the conservative side is not over the social issues anymore. I think you're right. I think the Republicans in Colorado have, the lawmakers in the House anyway, they have one more year of their term left until they have to run again. One more year to maybe go back and pass this bill before Tim Gill decides to dump a ton of money into state House races to ensure that Democrats win back a majority and can pass this the following year. So it's kind of how much do you want to antagonize Tim Gill, and a larger point is how much do you just want to continue to marginalize or to sort of constrain the party as this sort of party that's closed to gays, closed to Latinos. I mean, the in-state tuition bill is another instance where I think Republicans voted to kill a bill, and at the end of the day, there are large and growing constituencies out there.
Explain the bill.
The in-state tuition bill?
This was going to give
This was
in-state
going
tuition.
to give unsubsidized in-state tuition to undocumented students. So you graduate from high school, you're not a citizen, but you get accepted to a college. There may be 500, 700 kids that this would have applied to in the state. They would have gotten in-state tuition plus whatever the cost of the COF subsidy that in-state kids that are residents get. They would have had to pay a little more in in-state residents, but it would have been much more affordable than, say, paying out-of-state tuition.
Because here in Colorado, from K through 12, you don't have to prove citizenship. If you show up at the door of the school, they're going to bring you all the way through 12th grade. But if you go to the doorstep of any community college, if you want in-state tuition, you got to prove that you're a citizen.
And it's hard for some families because you have older kids that were brought here illegally. Then the parents have since had more children who are here, and they are here legally. And so you have within own family people that can go to college on in-state and others that can't.
But does that hurt Republicans in 2012?
I'm actually going to disagree on whether that hurts Republicans because I know I have a family member that's very liberal and she's totally opposed to it and thinks it's a terrible idea. If you looked at the comments when we wrote our stories, Robert Ramirez, obviously, he has relatives in Mexico and all that, and he voted against it, and most of the comments were, a lot of the comments were pro him, and it wasn't that rabid, like, angry blogger thing. I am going to go back to the Gill thing. I mean, the one thing in defense of Republicans on this, as if they had passed this bill this year, Tim Gill would put his checkbook away. Come on. Do we really believe that if the Republican-controlled House had passed civil unions, that the strikers, the Tim Gills, would no longer be supporting?
No, but they might move on to other states. For Tim Gill and Pat Stryker, who has a gay brother, and Jared Polis, who put a lot of money into it, who's also gay.
In 2004.
In 2004.
He hasn't since then. That's
but
a myth.
they put together. Tim Gill put a ton of money in 2006 as well.
I know. I'm saying Polis was only 2004. Okay.
But I would think Tim Gill, if he can say we've won enough here, we've brought civil unions to this state, I have a feeling he would move a lot, not all, of his resources and organization to another state where the next likely thing to get that momentum going. And I think there are a lot of Republicans saying it's going to happen. Well, let me ask you this. Is it going to happen anyway? Is it a matter of time that civil unions pass in Colorado?
Sure.
If not 2012?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody says that. Even the Republicans who are opposed to it say that.
There's no, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a civil rights issue of this generation to a lot of people. And I think whether it's 2012 or 2013, that time is coming. As far as Tim Gill goes and the amount of money he puts in next year, he's not going to take his checkbook and leave Colorado, but it's the size of the check. And I really, his attorney.
Size matters.
Yeah. So I've been told. His attorney told me the day this bill was going down that if this goes down, it's that much more money that we're putting into these races because this is that important, and he's shown that he will spend money to influence the.
And Marilyn Musgrave lost because of Tim Gill's dogged determination, election after election, putting in as much money as it took till she was gone.
Well, he started the fire, and I think her own staff added some gasoline to it.
All right, let's bring it to some personalities because that's always fun. Mm-hmm. First year with a brand new governor, and so this has always been good. People like Hickenlooper as a mayor. He was a strong mayor. He also had that great quirky personality. He was able to seem like a pro-business guy, but then also work on tax increases and debt increases unlike any man I've ever met in political history. How did he do as a governor? This is the first year. I didn't see him do much. Did I miss something?
No. And I think that's just how he wanted it. I think at the end of the day, his staff and the governor himself felt like they had a really good session. They got a compromise on the budget. They almost were able to work a deal on redistricting. They averted a special session on the last day by forging a compromise and flexing some muscle. I mean, they have some political capital down there on the first floor. And, it was interesting. You go back to the budget debate. Hickenlooper sort of stood above and watched the whole situation play out. But at the end of the day, he could bring everybody together. And it was those press releases that Lynn talked about that the Republicans put out immediately when the Democrats wanted to, do something to offset cuts to schools. The Republicans said, we're with Hickenlooper, right? Lynn has a scrapbook full of them. Well, as soon as they did that, Hickenlooper had them in his pocket. The Democrats were going to be there for him, but the Republicans lost a lot of leverage by immediately embracing Hickenlooper's budget.
How so? Why?
Because when at the end of the day, he could come back to them and say, look, you're out there, you're on record saying what a great budget this is, and now it's as if you didn't read the thing when you're complaining about, oh, well, now we want to do this, we want to reinstate the Amazon tax, et cetera. There was just, and I think maybe there's some fear of him. There's a desire to work with him. What's interesting is the Republicans sort of embraced him this year. And I think came away feeling like, well, Hickenlooper got what he wanted out of the deal. If conservatives at the Capitol feel like, we carried some water for him and we didn't really get enough out of it, next year could be different.
What do you say?
Well,
first year, you've seen
Hickenlooper. I covered him when he ran in 2003. What I love about Hickenlooper is you could go up to him and say, hey, Jon Caldara says this about you. And he laughs. If you did that with Bill Owens or Bill Ritter, they'd be like, when did he say that? Are you going to print that? It's all, he takes everything. He's got that great, personality where he takes it, but he's very serious.
But at the same time.
But when you say he didn't do anything, I actually disagree. I think the mark of a really good, that was great, is he did a lot of things. He had his people doing things behind the scenes.
Such as?
Well, first of all, he's out doing things that, he's out talking to people. They did a big.
I talk to people. I talk to lots of people.
Okay, we're talking about people who have power and personality.
People I don't actually give $1 bills to all the time.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Diamond Cabaret doesn't count. I read about you in the paper. Jello, the pimp guy.
Oh, no,
Was
no,
your name
no,
with
no,
that?
no.
Wrong thing?
They didn't associate me at all.
Okay,
There's no
you were
proof.
cleared. You
Talk
were
to my lawyer.
cleared. Okay.
There
Harvey Steinberg.
There was
Jon Caldara says he's innocent. No, this whole thing, he didn't do anything. I actually think that he did a lot because you'd see his people doing things, and that's what his
things
people
like
are
what?
supposed to do.
Other than talking to people.
Well, like we said, the budget, this, that. I mean, look, the legislature is really only supposed to be there to pass the budget, and you pass all these other bills about wastewater and this and that. I mean, what did you want him to do? I guess that's my question back to you. What was he supposed to do that he didn't do?
Quit.
Hello?
Supposed to resign. You mentioned a little bit about the personality, and it's true. I think
The tireless look.
Well, not just the
But that's
the geeky
part of
look,
his
but
personality.
the idea that you can go up to him and make a joke at his expense, and he'll laugh and throw one right back at you. And I never got that feel from Bill Ritter or Bill Owens for that matter. But I'd say that Hick still has a good political gene. What's been the biggest difference between Hick and Ritter? Ritter was not seen as a good organizational guy. He never seemed to have, this is the issue we're going to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and the situation was different for Ritter because he had Democrats controlling both chambers, and he had to make a lot of difficult decisions early. Everybody knows the story as far as the business and the labor flare up at the beginning of his administration. I think Jon came in and had a split chambers, and that
Which worked to his advantage.
It worked great to his advantage. And Lynn's right. His staff was all over the building. Christine Scanlon was busier than she's probably ever been as a state lawmaker, lobbying on the governor's behalf and making sure that certain bills had the support to get through quietly, making sure that other bills, if they didn't want them to get to the governor's desk, perhaps didn't get through or died on the calendar. But at the end of the day, what's interesting is that, unlike Ritter, Hickenlooper has, by my count, one very tough call on a bill that he's either going to have to decide to sign or veto by June 10th. And that's a bill to increase CHIP premiums on low-income families for children's health care plans. And that's the one thing where progressives are lobbying him very hard to veto that bill. And Republicans have been a little quieter.
That's it. I mean, that's it. There's no wild bill that he's got to worry about. The split legislature has done what a split legislature does well.
Because they kill what the other side says is too extreme. And it's perfect that I'm one of the people who thinks that history will be kinder to Bill Ritter than we have been. I think at some point people said, I think this is a huge factor too. I actually think for Hickenlooper's sake, that Dick Wadhams was out of the picture. Dick had decided not to run for re-election as the party chairman. And so when Dick was elected in March of 2007, he started a relentless attack on Ritter that never quit. And I think it was effective in just saying he's ineffective, he's this, he's that, he's this, the whole thing of just pounding away at his administration. And so, what they say.
But as far as signature legislation, I look at.
You mean Hickenlooper?
No, yeah. Let's go to Bill Owens. Bill Owens wanted to do the school report card system. He cut taxes. There were things every year.
T-Rex. He had three.
And T-Rex.
Those were the three things.
I look at Ritter, and it was energy policy, bringing us up to a ridiculous 30% mandate. That was his signature.
Faster.
And faster. Fees, taxes, but no other fees. That's his legacy. Hickenlooper in this year seemed to be a good caretaker governor. We have to close the budget. We're going to close the budget. That seems to be the signature.
I actually think maybe Hickenlooper borrowed a page from Obama, in which Obama inherited this horrible budget situation and said, let's do this, this, and this. And what has Hickenlooper said over and over again? You can't operate a business like this with this little reserves. We have got to double the reserves. We've got to do this. I think he spent a lot of time saying, we've got to shore up the reality of this budget here because we have this house of cards that doesn't work.
It's an interesting point that she makes about Dick Wadhams not being there. But I think if Republicans really wanted to throw the kind of Wadhams-esque bombs at Governor Hickenlooper, somebody else would have done it. I think they don't want to antagonize Jon Hickenlooper because he's a guy who, from a business background, a lot of moderate conservatives support him, voted for him, regardless of the context of last year's race. And the ammunition from the right this year, the target was Brandon Schaefer. I mean, if Brandon Schaefer just got worn out by Speaker McNulty, by a lot of different people down there, he bore the brunt of the attacks from the right, and Governor Hickenlooper was someone that it seemed like conservatives didn't really want to antagonize, at least not his first term.
And also, I didn't see the Republican House lobbying anything over to the Senate to die, such as ending the FASTER tax increase, which of course would die, or I know there was something on the Amazon.
McNulty addressed that because several people ran on that. There were actually bills that were introduced, but they didn't go anywhere. They died.
But it seems to me if you wanted to make a point of those things, Republicans would have sent them over to the Senate and let them kill it so the Republicans could beat their chest.
But
That did
actually
happen a
some
lot, yeah.
FASTER bills did go over to the Senate where they died. To reduce the late fee and all this stuff, they did die. I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, in fact, there was that big thing at first. Here's what Republicans ran on, and they're not upending all these taxes, right? And what they changed 2 of them, I think. Repealing FASTER, which they did. But Frank even said, here's the reality. That would have been great if we had captured both houses. But we didn't, and so let's be smart about what we're doing.
Minute left. Let's talk about the one that did get a lot of traction, which was Amy Care, or the health care exchange, where you had Betty Boyd, a Democrat, and the majority leader in the House, Republican, joining up to build an Obamacare exchange, and that got very heated.
It did at one point, and you saw the schism between the Tea Party and the other part, the more establishment part of the Republican Party. And you know, a lot of the Republicans that have taken office now and that won last year, they won back this majority, they got used to what it's like to actually govern now. And I think that by the end of the session, they'd sort of figured that out. It wasn't easy the entire time, but Amy Care was resolved, and I think going forward, they know what to do.
That's what. No, there's no Republican in the House who was ever there when they were in the majority, and they'll tell you it's great to be in the majority, but damn, it's a lot of work. You know, it's easier just to sit on your side and throw bombs.
Lynn Bartels, thank you. Eli Stokols, thank you, and most importantly, thank you, because you can't find the remote control, and I know that's the only reason you're still here. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.